Alright, in this session of our tutorial, we're going to go over the documentation tab or portion of the interactive workbook. You can see here, again, looking at the bottom, through all our different worksheets in a given quarter, we have the invoice, we have the report, then this doc, and then the quarter number or documentation, in addition to travel, and I've also now created a timesheet spreadsheet there, which potentially I'll go into in a later session. Looking here at the documentation session, with each invoice that we submit additional documentation, which includes invoices from our organization for specific categories of services. So going back to our main invoice here, we'll be charging a certain amount to the contract for our program manager, as well as other categories such as coordinator, admin, and so on. So for our program manager and some of those others, we need an organizational invoice where we are invoicing EPD in this case for that particular category or service. So going back to our documentation tab, this here, this page on the left is our program manager invoice, and I'm going to just take a moment and make this view in page layout view, just so we can kind of focus on a particular page. So this document is set up so that header, or it's not officially the header, I guess, but the top line that describes what this invoice is for, program manager, this field is automatically going to fill in from whatever description or title we put for that position back over here on our cumulative budget page at the beginning of our contract. Again, see it's in orange, so that's one of the colors that, remember, we need to fill in and enter in by hand. So see here, program manager, in this case an organization, often that's Rhonda Gordon. With some, although some other contracts it becomes a different person. But anyway, so whatever title or word you put in you here for that particular contract, that's going to automatically fill in for your documentation. Okay, I'm going to actually, for demonstration purposes, use the second quarter here. Documentation for the second quarter. So this title will automatically fill in. The organizational name and address will automatically fill in from the invoice. I've chosen to just always draw from the first invoice because that's going to be the same throughout the whole contract, unless your organization happens to change names or address during the life of the contract. But so these are drawing. See, it's filling this in from invoice quarter 1, particular cell C3. Alright, it's filling in the quarter for us, it's filling in the time frame for us. Again, it's drawing these from either an invoice or the cumulative budget spreadsheet, as you can see described up here. The person's name, which again we filled back in over here. We filled in the person's name for the program manager for that contract. The name of the contract, and so on. Now, I simply created this invoice from other invoices that we have been using historically for 319 contracts, and they have these categories of date, hours, description, mileage, total hours, and so on. We've been leaving those blank and haven't been filling those in. That information gets supplied through other documents. in our invoicing. Of course, if a person wanted to utilize that table, they certainly could. I haven't made that part of our worksheet here because it's just not part of how we've invoiced at Golden Triangle. So anyway, for the purposes of this tutorial, you can just ignore filling in any data here in these different columns. Again, unless you're with a different organization and your organization decides to do that, or EPD gives us different instructions on that down the road. But for now, these can be left blank. So the rate of pay. This amount is just taking the grand total for a particular category. So that's and it's dividing it up per year. So it's set up, let's see, I believe for a 12-quarter contract. Anyway, oh, I'm sorry, not for a 12-quarter contract. It takes this amount that we decided we want to charge for each quarter and multiplying by 4, and that's how much we're doing per year. So we determined this amount. It's drawing this amount from our invoice, and our invoice, that information is here, and we determined that amount. In our case, you just have to talk with your whoever the program manager or project lead person is for that 319 on how you want to manage the buckets on any given category. But typically for these personnel ones, you're just dividing the total amount that you have for the whole contract by the number of quarters that you have. So over here, if we had $10,000, if you just divide that by 12 quarters, then you get to that $833 and 33 or 34 cent number. So that's how that number was derived. So that's entered in manually on the invoice right here, because again it's in red. So then that information feeds into the documentation spreadsheet and fills it in here for us. It also calculates how much that would be per year, just multiplying that amount by 4. This is just information we typically had put in our invoices historically, and so I entered that in. There's a spot here for brief explanation if it was needed on that particular quarter, if you're making some adjustments for one reason or another based on the fact of under invoicing or over invoicing in previous quarters, or if there's any explanation needed, that's why it's in red, so you could fill that in. If no explanation is needed, you could simply delete the word explanation for that particular quarter. And then it will fill in that total for you. I'll come back to this little chart here a little bit later. Then, so for each of our personnel positions, we have a separate invoice. So next we have our project coordinator. Again, it's filling that in, as indicated by the fact the lettering is green. It's filling in from our cumulative budget spreadsheet. Fills in the name of the person, again, from the cumulative spreadsheet. And it will fill in all these numbers for you once you've entered them in on the invoice, which of course I haven't entered anything here in for our project coordinator at the moment. Using my internal reference spreadsheet, it's telling me based on the fact that there are 11 quarters left in this particular contract, including this current one, including quarter 2. It's calculating for me that recommending that I charge $909.09 for that. So I could simply type that in. And then once I do that in my documentation spreadsheet here, that's what fills in there for me. All right, I suppose as you can see here, this number now has populated just multiplying that by 4, the amount per year. The lettering is in black. Those who have been paying close attention would highlight that lettering should be in green because that's a number that's automatically calculating, and that's just an oversight on my part. I didn't get that highlighted to green. I'll change that now. But you'll find that from time to time there's some places, just little things like that that I missed. So, all right, then we have our personnel admin spreadsheet here. It's again auto-populating the information that's needed. I haven't filled any financial figures yet for that bucket for that quarter over on my invoice, so those are all blank. All right. There also is an invoice for the fringe category for whatever number of employees. Typically for us that's 3 employees, but whatever number you have, it's going to fill in a number here, amount per month automatically for you. Again, this is just typically how our fringe invoice looked in for our contracts, so I just recreated that here in Excel. Okay, in addition we have we generally submit a sheet that kind of further illustrates our fringe, called our fringe documentation sheet. And it's filling in the client or contract, the folks' names. I have this 4th person here, which you could just delete because in most cases you're not going to have more than 3, but maybe there are some 319s that have more than 3 people. I'm just not sure. So you could delete that 4th line. Typically a golden triangle you would if this is someone from our own staff watching this. It's going to fill in the time frame for you. It's going to fill in the total amount for the life of the contract. Again, that's something you would have filled in over here in the fringe. At the beginning of the contract, you would fill in from the contract paperwork, the budget paperwork, you would fill in that number right here. And so it's going to break that down for you. So back over here, it's filling all that in and then breaking down the amount per quarter. The number of hours worked is how many hours you're putting toward this contract from that particular employee for that quarter. Again, you can see those are in green, so that's automatically going to fill in for you. Those are filling in, as you can see, from cell W6, and that's from up here. So let's go take a look at that other documentation sheet here, W6. Okay, this is our personnel documentation sheet, and it's basically just showing the total number of hours that each person involved with the contract worked in that quarter. Now, if you are using my timesheet template here, which I'll go into more at a later date, it will automatically populate for you the amount of hours for that person. However, I've created these, put these numbers in blue. Blue is going to be a color I've decided where it's a number that's going to auto-populate, but one that you should double check. So kind of like the green, and that it's going to automatically fill in for you, but if it's blue, you need to double check it, and something to pay close attention to. And I'll explain employee time a little more at a later date, or in a later tutorial. Okay. Anyway, that will fill in the amount of hours worked. If you choose to use these time sheet spreadsheets, some folks using this workbook may choose to not use these timesheets and just ignore them, in which case you would need to enter in the number of hours worked for each employee by hand and just type over the formula that's there, and that's fine if you choose to do that. There's definitely a bit of more nuance with individuals' times involved, which I'll go into again in a later tutorial when I go over the timesheet. So, but once you have a number there, be it one that automatically fills in from the timesheet or one that you've typed in by hand, then it will automatically populate that number of hours down here into your fringe documentation sheet for the number of hours worked. Yeah, so, but you need some number there if you're counting any time from any person, from that person, say Rhonda Gordon or whoever it may be, towards that particular contract for that particular quarter. So if you're not using the timesheet, then I might just take a timesheet I might get handed to me by a colleague, let's say Julie Shutters in this case, and take the total number of hours that we have collectively decided in that quarter we're going to count towards that particular contract, the Ochlockonee River in this case, and then we would just fill that number in here. All right, that's all for this one.